Hello and welcome to episode number 86 of the BigTime Strength Podcast. Coach Rozier here, and first off, I would like to apologize. Number one, it's been a little bit since I've gotten a podcast up. Just a lot of stuff happening right now, obviously, but I appreciate Coach Preston for kind of covering for me. He got up two in a row, and I'll bring up two in a row here now. So our first one here is today we got Coach Kyle Van Wyk. He is the head strength conditioning coach at Dordt University. Been there for 2 years now, and I really appreciate him coming on. He has some really good stuff for us today. And before we get to him, let's talk about our amazing sponsors, TeamBuildr. They're the leading software for high schools and colleges by providing coaches the ability to write programs online, generate over 13 reports, and even train athletes remotely. If you sign up with code BigTime, you will receive a free APRE programming template, which works automatically within TeamBuildr. No more spreadsheets and workout cards to track training maxes that change day by day. Automate your programming without outsourcing your programming with TeamBuildr. And guys, if you need an example on what kind of company TeamBuildr is, look them up right now and see what they're doing for our profession in this coronavirus era time of need. They're providing all kinds of resources, free trials. Hewitt and their company, they're just spectacular. They're in it for the right reasons, and they do just a fantastic job. And of course, as always, we appreciate them supporting us here on Big Time Strength. Our second sponsor, Powerlift. They're the leading manufacturer and distributor of heavy-duty strength training equipment for collegiate and high school athletic performance centers around the world. They bring over 20 years of experience to the strength conditioning world. All products are manufactured in their state-of-the-art manufacturing facility in Jefferson, Iowa. They are proud to support all the coaches making the big time where they're at. Another outstanding company, and as always, we really appreciate Powerlift as well. You can find the contact information for both sponsors in the show notes. I encourage you to check that out. One more kind of announcement before we get on to Kyle here is something exciting on the future radar is Coach Preston was planning on hosting a big time strength clinic, which is actually supposed to be today, the date I'm recording this. But obviously that's been canceled. So instead, he is recording all those presentations through webinar. I did mine last week, and it's a really cool setup. And he will be releasing those very soon for everybody to get a hold of. So look out for that. There's going to be over about 10 strength coaches and also about 10 football coaches giving you some awesome presentations to hit a wide variety of topics, and a really great idea there from Coach Preston Peterson. So be looking out for that. Okay, let's get on to the show here. Real quick, there is maybe kind of a brief awkward pause there in the middle. I did accidentally drop Kyle in the middle of this call, but we will work around it and we'll edit together to make it sound as good as we can. So enjoy Kyle Van Wyk. All right, Coach Kyle, I really appreciate you joining us on the Big Time Strength Podcast. Really excited about this. We got a chance to meet up at Sioux Falls at the South Dakota clinic a few weeks ago before this coronavirus stuff hit, and I knew I wanted to get you on the show, so I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today. And why don't you get us going here and maybe talk a little bit about your path so far in the industry and what you're doing right now at Dordt University.
Sure. Well, Gage, I just first want to begin with thanks for inviting me to come on the show. So I've had a chance to listen to some past episodes and hear some of the great coaches that you've had on here so far. So I'm just really excited to be a part of it and really, really grateful for that. So, but yeah, to give you some of my background. So I graduated from Dordt. I'm a Dordt graduate. And my first job out of college was actually at kind of a shared physical therapy and wellness center, and I was actually the wellness manager. And I did a lot of personal training, sport performance coaching with area high school athletes and things like that, and would put on some community health programs and design like a 5K run every summer and stuff like that. But it got to a point where I wanted to pursue my master's, and with the thought process of obtaining a job that I have now. So I was at that job for about 2 years and then left for graduate school at Wayne State College in Wayne, Nebraska. And there I was a graduate assistant for 2 years, actually in their health and human performance and sport department. I was a teaching assistant, but I also went with coaching and some research as well on a thesis and things like that. So really great experience there. Anything I had an idea of wanting to do, whether that was seeing myself teaching down the road, seeing myself coaching down the road, the opportunity to do research and do a thesis and stuff like that. Really, all those opportunities were there, presented to me at a kind of a smaller school. So I had a great experience there. Oddly enough, when I was there, they actually did not have a hired strength and conditioning coach. So I believe you've had Coach Darnell on your show before,
right?
And he's there now, and he's done a fantastic job. But oddly enough, when I was there, they didn't have that position for him there. So I worked with some teams, mostly track and field, and some of their training while I was there. But we kind of Grant and I just missed paths with each other. Whereas I was leaving there, he was hired on to be there. So I wish I could have had the opportunity to work with him and be under his guidance for a little bit. But our paths didn't cross that way. But while I was at Wayne State, earned my master's degree in exercise science and gained some experience teaching, coaching, and researching. After that, had about a 2 to 3 year period where I had jobs outside of the field, just with certain opportunities that arose that were beneficial for me at the time. But then, actually, my brother Corey kind of gave me a heads up of, hey, I think this job is opening at Dordt. I think you'd be interested in it. And so I just kind of kept my eye out for that. And surely enough, the position was posted for a dual role, health and human performance instructor, as well as all the sport performance coaching at Dordt University. So I've been at Dordt now just for 2 years. A little over 2 years now, and I've done that dual role of teaching 2 classes each year, and then also handling all these sport performance coaching and training for all of our varsity athletic teams.
Well, that's a great background leading to where you're at right now, Coach. And maybe I want to stick right there just for a second, and maybe you can expand a little bit just on your role itself there. I know I've had a few coaches that are in a similar role with that as well. What is maybe the most difficult thing about that? I mean, do you have to really say transition from maybe professor mode to coach mode multiple times throughout the day, or what's that kind of look like for you?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I do have to make that transition for sure. This January through March, we did having a lot of early morning training sessions, and then I also teach my class at 8 a.m. So you're talking being done at 7:30 with the student athletes, and then you have that half hour to kind of switch modes and teach a class at 8 a.m. in the morning. So my teaching responsibilities falls within teaching 1 class each semester. In the fall, I will teach assessment and evaluation in health and human performance. So it's a lot of test prescription, especially for more field tests rather than more lab tests. So field tests for testing individuals' cardiovascular endurance or muscular strength, muscular endurance, balance, flexibility, muscular power, and teaching our students that are health and human performance majors how to set these tests up, how to organize them, and how to obtain data and what to do with the data. So there's a little bit of statistics component that we go through as well, as far as some basic statistical procedures. So that's kind of what that class focuses on. And then currently this semester, as it's transitioned to online education, is their exercise physiology class. So
Gotcha.
Going over the nuts and bolts of kind of at the beginning of the semester, it's more pretty science-heavy based things like bioenergetics and things like that. But then we kind of progress to more hands-on applications like what are the adaptations of resistance training? What are the adaptations of aerobic and anaerobic training and things like that? So, but yeah, there is a distinct kind of flipping a switch of, especially at a small school where you're handling a lot of different responsibilities, wearing a lot of different hats, that I have a lot of our student athletes and students in general as an instructor, as a teacher, and then they also have me in a different capacity in the weight room as their sport performance coach. And it took me a little bit when I first had it just to be able to flip that switch and do it in an effective manner that I felt I was being effective. And so that was a learning curve at the beginning, and so that's gotten better, obviously with time. But yeah, that was something that was a little bit of a learning curve for me at the beginning. So, yeah.
Yeah, I bet that is interesting for some of your student athletes who maybe you get after and then you see them about an hour later in the class and teach them. It's kind of an interesting dynamic, I'm sure at times. But
Yeah,
Coach,
exactly.
are you able to leverage maybe your department there to help you out from a staff standpoint or with interns or anything like that?
Yeah. So really, my first year, it was kind of just. So I took this job in January of 2018. I got moved into where I'm currently at right now, and the semester started like 4 days later. So it was just that whole first year was kind of a whirlwind of just getting my feet wet. And even though I was a Dordt graduate, I hadn't been back in about 10 years, to where things had changed, and I kind of had to figure out how everything worked. We had a new athletic director and just knew kind of how everything operated. So actually, we're currently in the process of transitioning the focus of, I oversee some work study staff, the students that report to me for work study, and transitioning their focus to helping me coach.
Gotcha.
So I know a lot of institutions have an internship program, and that's something that I think we'd like to eventually transition to as well down the road. But for our situation right now, to get some extra help and coaching staff to athletes and teams to better even out that ratio a little bit more, we're going to transition our work study. So I need to be pretty selective with my hiring. So ideally, it's going to be our HHP students that are majoring in exercise science that have an interest in coaching strength and conditioning down the road, hiring them on and basically taking them through the ropes of, it's going to be educational, but it's also going to be hands-on. And once I've had these students in as a work study staff for, 2 or 3 years, then being able to progress them to maybe handing them off their own team or teams to kind of alleviate, one guy handling all the teams.
Yeah.
So that's our plan right now. I think eventually we'd like to progress it to, okay, can our students earn 4 class credits for this as part of like an internship and things like that. But our program is relatively new that way, that that's the position we'd like to get to. But for right now, we're going to kind of go this route of hiring work study staff for myself and getting them into really understanding what coaching strength and conditioning is.
Right.
And through that process, our students can learn basics of kind of, you name it, like designing a proper warm-up, designing a properly designed, program, not day by day, but also what does that look like across an entire week and into months and things like that. So periodization, proper program design, as I see it, with exercise order and things like that, and progressions and regressions of exercises. So that's the direction we're planning to move. It won't start until our students come back in the fall now.
Right.
But that's the direction we're trying to move with this. To answer your question.
Yeah, and I think I think more places need to do that. I think that if you guys have the ability to do that, that will be obviously a great resource for the students, but, obviously help you, I'm sure, from a staffing standpoint in the weight room, be fantastic. So,
yeah, and as a work study position, they're getting paid money for this too.
Right.
So, and so that's a little bit of incentive for them to do a good job and things like that. So that's something that we're excited for.
Yeah, that'd be a great setup. Coach, maybe talk about, I'm sure you've had a lot of hurdles you've had to jump over, since starting this role in January 2018. So can you maybe talk about maybe the toughest hurdle you've had to overcome and maybe how you did overcome those challenges?
Yeah. So when I first took this position over, the weight room we had was a shared space within our recreation center. We shared it with just general members that had a membership to our recreation center. So there was always this awkward, when we post a schedule of when teams are training, and you'd still come in for when a team is supposed to start. Maybe we did our warm up out in the track or one of the courts, and you go into the weight room and you more or less kind of have to kick people out. So there's always just this awkward transition of that type of thing. I'm a little bit, I'm pretty nitpicky with just how things look and should be put back and all that type of stuff too, because I think a lot of strength coaches are. And, I'd go into the weight room and there'd be just like a loaded hex bar with like 5 plates on each side that somebody got done with and just left. Or, there'd be a barbell that has weight on one side but not on the other. And, one barbell set at J-hook level 8, and the other side at an incline up to J-hook level 10. You're like, how does that even happen? I don't know. And also within our rec center, we had a gymnastics program with the community. And let's see, last November, we got, like, out of the blue, our athletic department found out that this gymnastics program was moving out of our recreation center into their own facility. So it left us with this open space. And in the span of about, so the challenge, to answer your question, was having this shared space that was just always the transitions between community members and when teams lifted, and just keeping it how I wanted to keep it, as far as like a facility, a performance facility, that was a tough hurdle for me. So then when we had this opportunity to move into a new space that was it was a little bit bigger, but just the fact that we could have our own space, we could outfit it the way we wanted it to be like, and not have to have this crossover of athlete space and shared community space. Within the span of about a month, our athletic department, we did a great job of raising $100,000 to outfit the place with proper flooring. We took a lot of our current equipment and moved it over. We're just adding, since we have a little bit more space, we were able to add 3 or 4 more half racks and things like that, outfitting it with more dumbbells, and then just upgrading some of the things that needed to be upgraded, some odds and ends and stuff like that. So when I first arrived there, that was a big challenge, just to figure out how the scheduling works, how is it efficient, that it works for both parties. Obviously, I had a bigger interest in what our student athletes were doing and what they were able to do with our space. But we've been able to overcome that challenge.
All right, Coach. Let's maybe switch gears a little bit and let's talk training. So what is your training philosophy, or maybe principles that you guide by there at Dordt?
Yeah, like you might hear a lot with a lot of strength and conditioning philosophies and things like that. Ours probably follows a similar format, but that's because I think it's just so rooted in fundamentally what strength and conditioning is used for, the purpose of it. So the 2 major things we want to do with our program is reduce the risk of injury. I tell our athletes all the time that, your best ability as an athlete is availability. So really the number one reason we're doing a lot of this stuff for is to reduce your risk of injury, because we know you're a great athlete. Your coaches recruited you because you're a great athlete and can help their program and our program as a whole. So your best ability as an athlete is availability. We want to keep you healthy. We want to keep you playing day in and day out, however often that sport competes. So that's the number one thing we want to do. And also we do want to improve your performance in the physical attributes that occur in sport that we deem, hey, if we get better in these certain things, it's going to help you as an athlete by improving these physical attributes. So how do we go about those two major things? With a smaller school, we have to use the most bang for our buck with compound multi-joint exercises using free weights. So it is a lot of barbell work, a lot of dumbbell work. We have other supplemental things like kettlebells and bands and TRX suspension training and things like that. But the bulk of our work is done with barbells and dumbbells. So utilizing compound multi-joint exercises, mostly with free weights. I'm also very movement pattern focused. So rather than thinking about muscle groups and things like that, it's more focused around what are our movement patterns that we can put under a load and progress with a stimulus to get stronger, more durable, things like that. So thinking about squat, lunge, hip hinge, press, pull, and then with our torso training, shifting much to more focused on really resisting training with anti-extension, anti-lateral flexion, and anti-rotation. Also prescribing an exercise order that I believe is the most beneficial and efficient for the human body system, beginning after a warm-up, essentially beginning with plyometrics with a fresh central nervous system, moving then on to power development against a resistance, so think about snatches and cleans and things like that, and then progressing to our major strength exercises, and then finishing out with more supplemental and accessory work as the demands of the central nervous system are lessened because of the stimulus from beginning to end of the workout. And then also making sure that we have three-dimensional training as well, covering our bases with sagittal plane movement, which that's easy to fill those cracks in, but covering frontal plane, transverse plane, that we're exposing our athletes to a lot of different movements that they could experience out on the field, on the court, on the ice, and things like that, that we're getting those under a safe load that can strengthen how the body moves across a three-dimensional movement pattern.
So what are some of the maybe programming methodologies that you've used within those principles that you've had success with?
Yeah, we've had a lot of really good success with kind of doing a mix and match of RPE and also working with reps in reserve. Typically, I'm in the room by myself with the team, so I can't see everybody's sets and things like that. So I kind of give them a lot of liberty in identifying, okay, well, based on this load, I don't want to limit you based on always doing what the sheet says, or we use a training app on their phones that they look at their phones and stuff too. But I don't want to always limit you to just what the sheet says or what the card says or what your phone says. I prescribe percentages for those reasons, because I ballpark, this is what we want you doing. But if you feel great today and you can push that beyond by getting extra reps at that load, then I want this exercise done at an RPE of whether it's 7 or 8 or what I've prescribed. But I also give them some reps in reserve of understanding, like, I want you to cut this set off, or this last set off, at having X amount of reps in reserve. So that gives our athletes some ownership and some liberty to really push themselves and progress themselves at the rate that they're progressing. Because I don't want to limit that based on saying, you do the number of reps that's written there, and based on that percentage, and you're cut off from that. Where if they feel like they can push themselves in a safe manner, we give them that ownership and that liberty to go with that. And we've had a really good response from our athletes by giving them kind of that sandbox to work within of utilizing a rate of perceived exertion and reps in reserve. So they kind of understand, hey, if Coach Van Wyck's prescribing, I'm supposed to get 5 reps on this, but I'm able to easily get 8. That's a good sign that I'm also improving and getting stronger too. So it kind of gives them some instant feedback too of the progress that they're making over time. And another thing we've had a lot of success with, I don't do it with every team, just because honestly some of the teams I work with don't have maybe a great enough foundational base that I want to institute this. But teams that I've spent a lot more time with or work with the most often, namely one of those would namely be football, is in our strength phase using some cluster sets on our benching and our squatting to really drive home some really great strength building, some mental toughness, and that they've really responded to that way by enjoying the challenge, but also knowing that, hey, if I'm crushing this, that also is a good sign that I'm getting stronger and making the progress that I'm hoping to make with the work that we're putting in. So some cluster sets within our strength phases, some rate of perceived exertion, some reps in reserve to give them that liberty and that sandbox to work within. That also gives them some instant feedback as far as how their training is going.
I am glad you brought up the RPE, because that's something we've been thinking about maybe moving towards here at Jewel a little bit at times, and for those reasons you mentioned. But I do have a question, like, what is your process of educating them on, what two in the tank or in reserve actually feels like. Um, is there a process with that? I mean, have you had any difficulties with that? Because like for me, I understand that, but I don't know. I feel like some of our athletes will have a hard time grasping that. Is that the case, or what's your experience with that?
Yeah, no. When you introduce it, just like what you're saying, me myself, I know what that feels like, and things like that. And honestly, it's just taken time for our some of our athletes to also understand what that feels like, especially if they have just kind of a lower training age or they haven't been doing it very long. Some of our athletes understand it right away, especially if they've been doing a lot of this stuff for quite a while throughout high school and through college and things like that. So, but yeah, we've had some of those same kind of learning curves and some hurdles to work around as far as our athletes understanding their own bodies and what that feels like as far as one rep left in reserve or two or three or four. I kind of cross over the RPE and the reps in reserve together. So like an RPE of 10 would be 0 reps in reserve, but basically a maximal set. An RPE of 9 would be 1 rep in reserve. An RPE of 8 would be 2 reps in reserve. So I've kind of mishmashed the two, so they can kind of go hand in hand together in that kind of conjunction, and that seemed to work well as far as understanding those two things kind of put together. So you're kind of doing two birds with one stone. Whether it's perfect, I don't really know, but we've had success with that, and students grasping it, understanding it, being able to utilize it, having success with it. And so the more I've seen it, it seemed to work in the way that I'm envisioning it working and wanting it to work. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of
Right.
thing. That I think the more exposure they get to it, the athletes then kind of learn that process as well with that learning curve and get a better feel for that. So I don't know if that's a great answer for you, but honestly, I think it just takes time.
Yeah.
And I give those analogies as far as combining the RPE and the reps in reserve and things like that, just so they hear it over and over and over, just so hopefully it sticks that one time that I address it again, that it makes sense to them and they get a better feel for it, so it becomes efficient and effective for what we're trying to do.
No, that makes perfect sense, and that's what I was kind of wondering is just how that process of getting to understand that, especially for those teams or athletes that have that low training age. I imagine um, that would be difficult at the start, but they might be the ones who pick up with it sooner if they're not exposed to other types of training maybe. I don't know. It's interesting, and I definitely am going to look into that a little bit more myself. But moving on here, what is your maybe vision, or what are you taking? Where are you taking your department there at Dordt next? What's your big plan?
Well, one of the things we kind of spoke about earlier was developing an undergraduate student system to improve the teams to coach ratio. So I kind of mentioned about that a little bit earlier with our work study staff that would be assigned to me that would assist with coaching. So it's a win-win for both parties. It kind of maybe removes some teams from my plate down the road. It gives our students that are health and human performance majors that are focusing on the exercise science concentration, it gives them experience to really understand what strength and conditioning is. And it gives some of our teams that maybe it's more difficult to give them a lot of more attention that they deserve, to give them the attention that they do deserve.
Right.
So really with those three parties, it's kind of a win-win around those three bases that I'm really hoping to progress over these next few years. So that's one thing. Another thing is I want to do a better job of educating our athletes and our coaches on what strength and conditioning is. Sometimes the longer I've been at Dordt, I get the feeling that there's a lot of misconceptions about what strength and conditioning actually is. And I guess each coach is going to have their own definition and have their own vision of what it is. I would like to implement better what I believe it to be, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions about, well, is strength and conditioning, is it like basically CrossFit? Is it strictly Olympic lifting? Is it more bodybuilding? Is it more powerlifting? And I would say no to all of those. I would say, okay, we take variations of Olympic lifts and infuse it into our training because we like how it better improves explosive muscular power and rate of force development. And we use variations of and aspects of powerlifting for general strength building, like the squat, like the bench press. If for sports that want to increase more size, maybe football and hockey and things like that, we do want to increase some hypertrophy and some muscular size, but it's not any one of those things all by itself. So better educating our athletes of what strength and conditioning is, but also I think some of our sport coaches of what strength and conditioning is. Sometimes I get the feeling that sport coaches, if they see their athletes doing something hard that makes them sore, that puts, physical pain on their face, they're like, oh, that must be good. That looks good. But I don't know if that's ultimately the end goal of strength and conditioning either. So I think getting our coaches understanding of what strength and conditioning is, at least in how I see it and how I want to implement it across the board for our athletes. Another thing that I've been really working with our athletes to have them understand how important the training itself is important for sure, but also the importance of things outside of training that can really drive your adaptations to come through fruition and result. So things like nutrition and sleep and stress management. And the analogy I've used with that I've had a lot of success with is talking about the phrase sharpen your axe. Mm. And the mindset behind this is we want to work hard, but we want to work hard and smart. We want to work hard and smart. So I got this idea from Abraham Lincoln's quote that if you give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'm going to spend the first 4 hours sharpening my axe.
Yeah.
And so the basis of all this is getting our student athletes to understand that we want you to work hard, but we also want you to work smart. So think about chopping with a sharp axe. You're still working hard, but you're going to get a lot better return on investment with your training if you supplement it properly with nutrition outside of training, with getting enough sleep, with stress management. And I work with them as far as, okay, what they should be consuming from a nutritional standpoint, of what they should be eating and how much and things like that. And the more information that comes out with sleep and how it greatly reduces the risk of sustaining injury, but that's also when adaptations happen. So if you want adaptations to happen, it's not going to happen by, blitzing yourself to exhaustion every single day. We want to work hard, but we also want to work smart. So we want to chop with a sharp axe, and we want a greater return on investment for the work that we're putting in. And that's going to happen with a sharp axe rather than a dull axe. So that's one concept I've used that's I think they understand and they get that, because I want to drive home just how important it is outside of training to do other things really well that is going to help drive those adaptations to come to fruition and help them become a better athlete when we have those adaptations happen. So, yeah. And then lastly, keep working toward a unified approach of training. I'm one voice across 12 different sport coaches and 500 athletes. So being able to develop, just keep instructing a unified training approach as far as whether you compete for this team or that team or whatever team that you play for, you understand and you hear the same verbiage as far as cues for a hang clean or a single leg RDL or a squat, and that it becomes a better unified training approach across the board. So that and I think that takes time as well, but just doing a better job of keeping that goal in mind and moving towards a unified training approach across the board for athletes. Because in today's age of social media, you can see a lot of things on social media that some of it's good, some of it's not, some of it's in between, that it can maybe make you feel like you're fighting an uphill battle because you're trying to establish certain techniques and cues and things like that I think just takes time, but also just trying to not fight that uphill battle and making sure that your athletes are all on the same page as far as what's expected of them, what exercises we do here, how we coach them, how we execute them, and how all these things put together is supposed to help you improve your performance and perform better on the court, on the field, on the ice, those types of things.
Yeah. No, I think those are all great topics you're striving towards there, and I think the educating the athletes and then coaches on what strength conditioning is, I think, is an important thing that we need to continue to remember. That, like you said, everybody has kind of their own vision for it, and I think a lot of coaches, and I'm just speaking for myself, I've cleared up a lot of my frustrations by just going and talking to coaches and making sure they're on the same page with what I'm envisioning and what they're envisioning, and making sure that if it doesn't line up, that we compromise, that we are on the same page. And I think that is a big thing. Don't just assume they know what's in your head. And I really liked your discussion there. It was a really good thing, because I think that's a big thing for a lot of coaches.
Yeah, and it seems so simple too that it doesn't come to mind right away. But that's something that the longer I've been here, I've thought the same thing. Well, maybe our coaches just don't really know. You kind of get in your own bubble about what your lane is, and you stick to it. And even in classes that I have, that when I talk about terms of hypertrophy and atrophy and periodization, and I need to remind myself even then, is just like, rather than just saying them and assuming they know what those things are, explaining them better. And so really that over the past year, that's just come, it was almost kind of like a light bulb of just, well, maybe they just don't know what strength and conditioning should be. Maybe they have this vision in their head of, when they watch sports movies and things like that, that they build up like this idea of, oh, that's what strength and conditioning is. And maybe that doesn't quite fall in line with what I believe it to be. So just that better education component with our athletes and our coaches regarding what I envision strength and conditioning to be.
Right. How about something that you're really excited about learning and improving on as a coach here? Well, we got a lot of time right now. I think we all do to explore some things. So maybe what are you diving into for some professional development?
Yeah. One thing I've been really diving into the last, I guess I don't want to put a time frame on it, but I would say linear speed development. I guess that's one thing that I think back to college, and I almost don't even remember how we went about even doing that when I was an athlete. And you read stuff with the NSCA, CSCS textbook and things like that. And I certainly don't make myself out to be a track coach, but I feel like when I'm trying to learn a linear speed mechanics and stuff like that, I feel like that's kind of what that avenue is. That honestly, I feel like that's something I need to do a better job of learning more about, and learning how to implement these things. And it also kind of depends on what your setup is, space wise and capability wise, and all that type of stuff. But yeah, linear speed training to better create things that are implemented well with what we have available to us at Dordt for, like I said, spacing, equipment-wise, and develop the best linear speed development program that we can with our situation that we have. So just reading a lot of books about it, and basically picking up different pieces of the puzzle that I think would work with what we have at Dordt. So that's one thing. And then another thing is really some additional methodologies for programming. Honestly, right now, with some of our teams, linear periodization works just fine. And I'm a pretty big believer in, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like, if we're having success with it, let's stick with it until we maybe notice a plateau or something like that, or we become a little bit more advanced that it isn't working as well as it was before. So honestly, I've had success with linear periodization, and I think sometimes it gets viewed as being like, oh, that's really elementary and basic and stuff like that. So we've had success with it, but I would like to identify some more ways, some additional methodologies that could be sprinkled into programming. So there's something else to move on to, that we could still continue to have success and make adaptations and improvements. I know earlier I spoke about some of the cluster sets and some of our strength phases and things like that. So that would be one thing, but I'm still, again, looking and reading for things that I think, based on the equipment we have, the amount of time we have, the level of training of the teams that we have, what's something that would be beneficial to, again, going back to our two major reasons for our strength and conditioning program, reducing the risk of injury and improving sport performance by improving the qualities that appear in sport from a physical attribute perspective. So what those things would be, identifying them and figuring out how they would best be implemented into some of the things we're already doing. I don't want to make like wholesale changes to what we're already doing, but just what are things that could fit right in that would make a positive impact for coaching and also for our athletes that are undergoing the training and things like that. So those are probably right now the two main ones. I know when I kind of put some of the stuff together, I'm thinking, yeah, we could probably have more time now than I was anticipating with some of the things that are going on in the world around us. So that list will undoubtedly get larger and longer. But those two main things right now are really big ones for me.
No, those are great, Coach, and I really appreciate you again spending the time to talk to us today. And this has been fantastic. And I wanna get you on with your day. I'm sure you got stuff to do. Hopefully, you're staying busy. So let's wrap this thing up with 4 quick questions. Number 1, who is the better strength coach, Kyle or Corey?
We're both pretty good.
There you go. For the listeners, we had Kyle's twin brother, correct? You guys are twins?
Triplets. We have
triplets. That's right. Yeah, triplets. He was Corey was on our show in one of our more recent episodes, so I thought I'd throw that one in there. He got a pretty good politically correct answer there, so that's good.
Yeah.
Number 2, what's your favorite office snack?
Oh, man, a can of mixed nuts.
Ooh, there you go. That's good. All right, this next one is the first time I've asked this question to anybody on this podcast, so I'm kind of excited about it. What's your most, or maybe not most, what's an embarrassing thing that happened to you coaching your athletes?
Oh, man. I'll probably, I don't know, maybe trying to demonstrate just a box jumps, and maybe I didn't get quite as high as I thought I just would right off the bat, and maybe didn't clear the jump quite as easily as I thought I would. That's probably not. Yeah, there's probably other things along the way, but yeah, maybe off the top of mind, that's probably one of them.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think that's happened to me too, multiple times. But I think I wanted to throw that question in there. I think that might be a fun one.
Yeah.
All right, last question for you, Coach. A small school strength coach who you think does a really good job and deserves a shout out.
Sure. Well, I've got to start with probably my best and greatest resource. About 10 minutes away, my brother Corey Van Wyk over at Northwestern College. He's been unbelievable in helping me, even though we're at rival schools. We talk shop a lot, just about just a small school strength and conditioning coach role with the teaching mixed in. So he's been unbelievable, and I love him like a brother. That's a joke. And so Corey Van Wyk for sure. My coach that I had in college, Bill Bauer. He's actually retired from the profession, but so I don't know what you could, as far as trying to get, he doesn't have Twitter or Instagram, but I just want to give a shout out to him too, because he helped me a lot when I was a student in college and getting my career path off and started and running. And then 2 guys that I've never met them, but I follow them on social media that I think they do a great job. And I know you shouldn't always just follow along with the people that agree with the same things you do, but I see their stuff and I see that the main thing is that they drive home with what they're saying and what they show with their videos is what are things that can reduce our athletes' risk of injury and what will improve their performance. Those are the two main things that we want our things to do. We don't want to get our athletes hurt during training by doing this, that, and the other. While it may look cool, it's just so what I see out of their training, I see those two things: reducing risk of injury and improving sport performance. One guy, his name is Craig Edwards. He's a strength and conditioning coach at the University of New Hampshire, and I believe he does women's hockey, women's volleyball, maybe another sport. But he just everything he shares is just really good, basic, fundamental knowledge that I think oftentimes that type of stuff gets by the wayside. So he does a great job of those two things. Again, everything geared towards injury reduction and improved performance. So Craig Edwards, he's a great follow on Twitter. And then another guy down in Texas, I've never met him as well, but he's put out some books and some performance of DVDs, and he teaches at McKinney High School in Texas. His name's John Sissick. And I've heard some other podcasts he's been on with Ron McKeefery on his podcast. And everything that he shares is just really good. He does just, I think, a really good job. And everything that he talks about, writes about, and shows through video just, again, speaks towards basic fundamental things that if you master them, and one quote I've come across really recently that I think just really explains that is finding the joy and monotony of mastery. And monotony is typically used as a negative term, but really the best athletes, they don't view basic fundamental things as I'm bored of this. They want to master those things. And a lot of stuff I see with John's work, again, his name is John Sissick, is mastering the basic and fundamental things that done over time are going to make a big, big difference. So I appreciate the content that he puts out as well that I want to give him a shout out to.
Well, no, those are great, Coach. And once again, just the time you've committed here, we really appreciate. And you're obviously doing amazing things there at Dordt University. And good luck, Coach. Make sure you're staying safe, obviously, and during this kind of crazy time. But wish you nothing but the best. And hopefully, whenever we get training our athletes again, whether that's the summer or the fall, you'll be ready to rock and roll. So, Coach, again, thank you so much, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah, thanks, Gage. Thank you.